I'm Dave and welcome to the Cannon Chaser's Garage. Replacing a chain isn't as difficult as you would think. Plus, if you replace your chain soon enough, you can typically get away with 2 chains to 1 set of quality steel sprockets. But if you let your chain get too rough, it can actually damage the sprockets enough that you'll need to replace them as well. We found that with proper care and maintenance, we can easily get between 20 and 30,000 miles out of a high-quality aftermarket chain. However, most manufacturers tend to put lower quality chains on new motorcycles. Typically, OEM chains, even with proper care and maintenance, are lucky to last about 10,000 miles. To learn more about how to lube and adjust a chain, or to learn more about adjusting chain slack, be sure to check out our other videos. Now, there are a couple of methods for measuring the wear on your chain. The first is we're simply going to measure the chain slack across the length of the chain. Rotate the wheel about 1/4 to 1/2 a turn and check the chain slack. If any part of the chain is outside the acceptable slack measurement, typically between 1 inch and 1.5 inches, you are most likely due for a new chain. The second method is to, again, across the length of the chain, pull the chain away from the rear of the sprocket at about the 3 o'clock position. If the chain pulls away from the sprocket by about 3 to 4 millimeters, then the chain is worn. The final method, and the most accurate one, is to actually measure the chain. If you have a 520, 525, or 530 O-ring or X-ring chain, which happen to be the most common chain sizes, we want to count 16 pins, not links. If the distance between the 16 pins is greater than 256.5 millimeters or greater than 10.1 inches, your chain needs to be replaced. Additionally, if the chain has any tight links that do not relax when the chain is straight, that's a classic sign that your chain needs to be replaced. Finally, you want to inspect your sprockets. If the teeth are hooked, visibly worn, or broken, then you'll need to replace the sprockets as well as your chain. But like we mentioned earlier, if you replace your chain early enough, you can typically get away with running 2 chains to 1 set of high-quality steel sprockets. We've been running 2 chains to 1 set of sprockets for decades. On our current Multistrada 1100, the original chain was replaced at around 10,000 miles. The chain that's on it right now currently has over 20,000 miles on it, and both those chains were run on the original OEM sprockets. Now, you can only get away with doing this if you replace your chain before it gets too far out of spec. Otherwise, the worn chain will cause the sprockets to wear rapidly, which will force you to replace the chain and the sprockets simultaneously. Now, when it comes time to replace your chain, we strongly encourage you to use a rivet-style master link, not a clip-style master link. We've seen too many situations where a clip-style master link has failed, which can cause the chain to come off and potentially lock the rear wheel. We've even seen cases where the chain came off and got balled up around the front sprocket and broke the engine case. So please, just use a rivet-style master link. In order to do this, you will need a high-quality chain rivet tool. This will be a fairly expensive purchase. But the more affordable chain tools can typically only handle 1 to 2 chains before they fail, whereas the more robust chain tools will last a lifetime. For example, Motion Pro sells 2 chain tools, one for $90 and the jumbo chain tool for $140. Don't bother with the cheaper one unless you are only working with smaller, non-O-ring chains. In order to install a new chain, we're going to first need to cut off the old chain, cut the new chain to the correct length, rivet it in place, set the chain slack, and finally lube the chain. So, first things first, we need to loosen the rear wheel and move the rear wheel adjustment pretty much all the way forward. The jumbo chain breaker will push the pins out of even the most burly chains. But in order to help your tools last longer, we encourage you to use an angle grinder with a flap wheel to cut the tops off of the pins before we push them out. Remember, sparks will fly, so wear the appropriate protective gear. With the tops of the pins ground down, take your chain breaker and retract the extractor pin into the body of the chain breaker so that you can clamp the tool onto the chain. You want the extractor pin to be about 2 millimeters inside the chain breaker. Clamp the tool onto the chain, making sure to align the extractor pin precisely over the chain pin. Just snug the body bolt to hold everything in place. This doesn't need to be super tight. Next, you'll need to advance the extractor bolt, pushing the extractor pin into the chain pin. Once the pin comes out of the back, retract the extractor bolt and pin and remove the chain breaker, and the old chain will come off. Now's a good time to clean everything, because with the chain out of the way, you can really get in there and clean all the gunk away from the area around your front sprocket. With everything clean, put your new chain on. In most cases, your new chain is going to be too long, so you'll need to figure out exactly how many links you'll need. It's likely you'll need to move your rear wheel back again to get the most accurate reading on exactly how many links you'll need. Be very careful during this step. You do not want to cut one link too short. Otherwise, you'll end up with a brand new chain that you can't use for anything. Just ask fellow canyon chaser Ryan about how much fun it is to cut a brand new chain one link too short. We suggest using a Sharpie to mark exactly which link needs to be cut off. Then simply use the same method we've already used to break the new chain to the exact right length. Your new master link will come with a pack of O-rings or X-rings, as well as a pack of grease. We need to put an O-ring on each of the pins, then apply a liberal amount of grease to the pins and maybe even some into the inside of the chain rollers. Once the rivet is in place, we want to grease the face of the pins and install the last two O-rings over the pins. Then we want to place the master link plate over the top of the pins. The outer plate of the master link needs to be pressed on, so don't be stressed when the outer plate doesn't seem to fit the master link pins. To install the chain plate, retract the chain pin all the way into the tool and install the press plate in its place. When you fit the chain tool, the press plate should fit nicely over the outer plate of the master link. To press the master link plate into place, use only the larger body bolt. You'll only need a few turns to get the plate started. You need to double check that the master link plate is pressing onto the chain correctly. We need to make sure that the holes drilled into the face of the press plate line up with the pins of the master link. If you skip this step, you could damage the master link pins. Now, it's extremely important that we only press the master link plate on exactly as far as all the other plates in the chain. It's not a bad idea to measure an existing chain plate with a set of calipers and use that measurement to ensure you push the master link plate to the same distance. This final step is actually the most important step. We need to be extremely careful not to over-flare or over-mushroom the master link pins, otherwise the strength of the master link could be compromised. We'll need to set up the tool to rivet the pins. So remove the press plate, and depending on which chain tool you have, you may need to remove the extractor pin in order to fit the dimpled rivet head in its place. Most chain tools will also require you to fit the anvil on the back side of the tool to ensure the pins don't get damaged on the back side of the master link. Also, there is a very specific amount of flare we want for the master link. Typically, we want 0.5 to 0.7 of a millimeter of flare, which isn't much at all. We absolutely do not want to flare it smooth against the master link plate. Measure the diameter of the rivet pins before you flare so you have a starting point. This rivet measures 5 millimeters, so we need to flare it a total of 5.5 to 5.7 millimeters. We can only flare one pin at a time, so set the rivet dimple over the master link pin and make sure the backside fits nicely against the anvil on the backside of the chain. Again, we only want to use the body bolt to flare the rivet. This typically takes less than one full turn. We like to only turn about a half a turn, remove the tool, and measure the flare. We're currently at 5.3 millimeters, so we'll refit the chain tool, turn about a quarter of a turn, and measure the flare again until we get the desired final number. Then we simply repeat that process on the second pin. Next, we want to adjust our chain to the proper chain slack. If you don't know how to do this, be sure to check out our other video that walks you through these steps. Finally, even though the chain does have some white grease on it, we suggest adding a nice coating of fresh chain lube. Again, please check out our other video that walks you through the process of cleaning, but most importantly, lubing your chain. And there you have it, a sparkling clean new chain. You'll swear your engine runs smoother and shifts better with this new component in place. Just be sure to properly lube and maintain it to get the maximum amount of life out of this expensive component. We suggest lubing your chain every 300 to 500 miles or every other tank of gas, more if you ride in the rain. Well, thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please check out canyonchasers.net for more product reviews, travel logs, how-to videos, and much, much more.